Job approvals, got fresh numbers in here, fresh intel and research. We got 4 new names on the head coaching radar tonight, and we've got some job approval numbers. Now, for one of these guys, he's not going to lead it off, but for one of these guys, I really think we need to reiterate heavily, these are up to the minute. This is not as of the end of the season. It's not as of a week and a half ago. So with one of these guys, a lot has changed in the past week that may have spiked his approval rating just a little bit. I guess you could say that about the first guy, too. So I should have just let off with that. Jim Harbaugh, job approval has got to be an A. What's the expectation level at Michigan? That's the first thing producer Jesse said when we were doing some research on this segment today. He said, I guess you got to ask yourself, don't you? What's the expectation level at Michigan? And for a long time, I don't know about internally, but nationwide, what had you come to expect from Michigan? Kind of a stepchild reputation up there, especially when it came to the Ohio State rivalry. They were having a difficult time dealing with Michigan State, and certainly you were not confusing them within the college football playoff picture. Their name was not in your mouth when you were talking about those sorts of things. And now all of a sudden, you got back-to-back wins over Ohio State. You got back-to-back Big Ten championships. You got back-to-back playoff appearances, good portal hauls. They are hitting in recruiting and development. Now, they're not recruiting top 5, but they are hitting in their evals and they're hitting in development. I think most importantly out of all this, and a contributing factor for all this, has been the program's attitude has totally shifted. Like Michigan, when I watch them now, number one, they're expected to win. Number two, they expect to win. And for 2 years in a row now, I've stood on the sideline at the Michigan-Ohio State game, and I've watched them be the aggressor. And they had played that game on their heels so many consecutive years. And Ohio State had taken that thing by the throat so many consecutive years that it was sort of jarring to see it last year, to the point, and search your heart, you know this to be true, where some of you thought maybe that was just an aberration. Maybe, I don't know, maybe there was this just perfect combination and confluence of events that day in Ann Arbor, but all will be rectified when they have to go to Columbus. They went to Columbus and did the same thing. And so now, how do I give Jim Harbaugh anything lower than an A? There are two things that if you want to just flip the coin and play the other side for the sake of fun, you could say, and that is one, maybe people don't approve of his continuous NFL flirtation. And the other is, while recruiting is good, we haven't seen the big spike that you would expect to see coming off a playoff trip last year, and now they've got another one. And recruiting's not bad. It's not bad. And when you're hitting on all your evals like they are, you don't necessarily have to recruit in the top 5. But this is nitpicking. This is not even my personal feel. This is just, if you were to nitpick this and say, oh, it shouldn't be an A, it should be a B+, I guess that's what you would have to say. Outside of that, they are rolling right now. So I'm giving Jim Harbaugh an A. Next up, more good news. Brian Kelly at LSU. Brian Kelly is an A man as well. And I've had several recollections recently of the fact that there were 7th place predictions for LSU in the SEC West in the preseason. I don't think that was the official media stance at media days or anything like that, but you guys have taken it upon yourselves to remind me in my mentions there were a lot of folks who were saying 6th at best, maybe even last, because the SEC West was going to be such a meat grinder, which I don't know. I mean, you could make the argument it kind of was. I could also make the argument it was down a little bit this year. It wasn't down enough for a bad team to win it, though. LSU had to be a good team, and they won the West in year one. They are a team that finished 12th in recruiting the past cycle, which is not a whole lot of Brian Kelly. They got Harold Perkins to come in there at the last minute. And don't overlook that. That guy overturned a couple of games for them this year, and now they're currently sitting 6th in this recruiting cycle. You know, that's that thing Brian Kelly can't do, by the way, the whole recruiting thing. That's what he can't do. He can't acclimate to LSU. He doesn't fit the culture, and he can't recruit in the South. 0 for 3 so far. Probably can't beat Alabama either, right? 0 for 4. So he's doing all that year one. It's almost like they haven't even got their feet under him. And they look really good. You would definitely call them ahead of schedule. Number 1, by the way, the number 1 portal class in the country right now, after being number 3 a cycle ago. Everything's pointing up. Every single thing's pointing up. Walker Howard left there recently. In years past, a quarterback prospect of that caliber leaving would make you say, oh, that's bad news for LSU. He left because two other good ones are there. So I don't know what more I could possibly be wanting from Brian Kelly this early in his tenure. I'm giving him an A. Man, maybe we should have mixed some more controversial names in here, because the next guy's getting an A-, and that is a long way away from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. What about Dan Lanning at Oregon? We go up to Eugene, Oregon. Dan Lanning, I'm giving him an A-. Remember the gut punch that was Mario Cristobal leaving Oregon? I think sometimes we tend to forget how we felt at the time something happened. This sport moves quick, and this is not the NFL. This is college football. So we've got dozens and dozens more names of head coaches and hundreds of assistant coaches and a bunch of players and programs, and it's just like drinking from a fire hose, to the point where when Cristobal left there, at the time, people looked and it was a disaster for Oregon. And then they kept right on keeping on, because they brought the youngest head coach in FBS in at the time, in Dan Lanning from Georgia. Never been a head coach a day in his life. First time at this level, period. And what did they do? Well, they had a really good year. Remember, we're basing this off a foundation of what the expectation level is. So I'll give you the bad part first. That Georgia game in week 1, hey, they didn't get blown out as bad as the national championship participant TCU Horned Frogs did. I guess we have to add that caveat in there now. But the Georgia game notwithstanding, they lost a couple of close games to Washington and Oregon State. You're never getting an A+ job approval rating at Oregon if you're losing those games. So if we're gonna chip away a little bit at the veneer, okay, there's that. But what was the biggest fear? The biggest fear when Mario Cristobal left Oregon had nothing to do with Oregon State or Washington. It wasn't even on the field necessarily. People were terrified recruiting was about to drop off, because Mario Cristobal had totally elevated the recruiting operation there. And it hasn't fallen off. So the biggest fear has not been realized. That is subsided. And they're right now recruiting very well. And when you combine what they're doing in recruiting with what they're doing in the transfer portal, talent acquisition is not an issue. It's not a worry for them. And so in lieu of that, man, they kept Bo Nix there. They had as good a quarterback play last year as you've seen from them in several years. The losses they did have were very close. Nix was a little bit banged up. Frankly, to me, one of the most impressive games they had this year was the Utah game, where they ended up winning a close game, and we're going in that week thinking Bo Nix may not even play. I mean, they had a lot of guys banged up. My point there is, you don't always have to win the conference championship, especially in year 1 of a head coach, to get an A- or an A+ grade. Relative to expectation, 1 year into the Dan Lanning tenure, I think they've exceeded it, and so I'm giving them an A-. Now, here's the most interesting name. This is the one I was talking about when we came into the segment a few minutes ago. What kind of job approval rating would you give Dabo Swinney at Clemson? And as I am about to give you my grade, when we talk about what the expectation level is at a program, have we redefined the expectation at Clemson? So, for example, since Dabo's been there a long time, you could easily compare him to Saban. When Saban got to Alabama, if you complained in 2010 because Bama lost 3 games, it would have been very easy to say, my, oh my, how quickly we forget what it was like before he got here. Because Saban had only been there like 3 years at that point. Or 4 years, whatever it is. But if you were to say that today, people who are 15 years old weren't even alive to remember the whole times in the past that you're referring to. And so my point is, at Alabama, the expectation level has long since been redefined. I would argue at Clemson, maybe the expectation level has long since been redefined to the point where it's not out of the realm of believability for people to complain when they're only winning 10 games. That's the new Clemson. That's the new standard there. I know it's aggravating for a guy like Dabo Swinney because he remembers those old days. For example, listen to this. These are wild stats, by the way. Dabo Swinney, you want to know how much he elevated this program? They've won double-digit games every year since 2011. Every single one of them. Before 2011, the last time they had a double-digit win season was 1990. He redefined Clemson football. You just totally redefined for an entire generation what the standard of Clemson football is. With that being the backdrop, I think it's an A-. I think it's an A- because you can't deny that there has been underachievement relative to their standard on the field the past 2 years. Not cataclysmic underachievement, just being off pace a little bit. They haven't slowed down to 0 miles per hour. They just slowed down a little bit. A little bit of air came out of the front right tire. Now, the reason why I said what I said a few minutes ago about it being interesting, we're timing this now, is because I think the job approval numbers, if we were to just take a straw poll of all Clemson fans, has gone up over the past week. Because Dabo Swinney made the biggest move in the coaching cycle, at the assistant level at least, and that was going and getting Garrett Riley from TCU. That's not a small thing at all. In fact, it's a very, very big thing, immunity. It also signifies that you've got a head coach there who, let's just call it like we see it, has a history of being a little bit stubborn, has a history of being a little bit set in his ways, and as you could see by his resume, those are good ways to be set in most of the time. He admitted a mistake. Like I said at the time, never gave you the satisfaction of admitting it to your face, never said it in a press conference, nothing like that, but he did admit it. The way he admitted it was he made a move, a very tough move, by firing a guy, cares a lot about and elevated and sort of took pride in developing, and brings in a guy from TCU, not of the Clemson family. And so, man, that's crazy. Before 2011, their last double-digit win season was 1990, and now they've won double digits every year since 2011. So I'm going to give an A- to Dabo Swinney. Now, we just did Harbaugh, Kelly, Lanning, and Swinney. I never went below an A- for any of them. I will be hawking the comment section. Because I know you guys. This has been a very, very spirited debate we've had with the job approval numbers. I will be very interested who you think should have been at the B level or below. And knowing you like I do, someone's going to drop a random C+ on me, and they're going to have a bullet point list, paragraphs deep, of reasons why. And it's an opinion-based thing, of course, so I'll be interested to hear your opinion.
Thanks for watching, guys. Don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. Make sure you like the video, and please subscribe to the channel. Not just for me, that's how we keep this entire thing free.